Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。US President Joe Biden is set to increase tariffs on electric vehicles from China to over 100% in a bid to protect the American fossil fuel industry and its gasoline cars from the switch to clean energy. China's electric vehicle brands from BYD to ZEEKR to NIO and dozens of others that you and I have never heard of have received glowing reviews from American media and car enthusiasts who say they are not only very high quality, but cost a fraction of what US-produced cars do. This is terrifying news for the Biden administration, whose only option now is to frighten already struggling, ordinary American people out of the chance to buy well-made, low-priced green energy vehicles with exorbitant taxes. Today, we'll chat with Adjunct Professor Warwick Powell from the Queensland University of Technology for his take. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. US citizens have faced a tough few years. Homelessness is up, more people are struggling to make ends meet, and rising inflation has made daily necessities more and more expensive. And things aren't looking to get any better, with President Joe Biden set to increase the tariff on Chinese electric vehicles from an already exorbitant 27.5% to an almost unbelievable 102.5% in the coming days. Now, I say almost unbelievable because the Biden administration has made a lot of decisions in the past few years that just a few years ago would seem unthinkable, but today are a terrifying reality for ordinary American people. The new tariffs will mean that a Chinese EV will cost US citizens more than double the initial price. As an example, Chinese brand BYD, now the world's top EV producer, has a popular model called the Seagull, which the Associated Press said drives well and is put together with craftsmanship that rivals US-made electric vehicles that cost 3 times as much. The Seagull sells for just US $10,000 here in China. In the US, it will set buyers back at least $20,250. As if the American people weren't struggling enough. The reasoning, according to the Biden government, is to protect the jobs of American auto workers, who are largely producing gasoline-powered vehicles. According to some sources, only 1% of vehicles on the roads in the US are electric. That is a problem, especially since the goal just a few short years ago was cutting carbon emissions and protecting the environment. Just for comparison, a massive 60% of the world's electric vehicles were sold domestically in China last year. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is trying to spin it another way, most likely in an attempt to stop the average American from realizing they're receiving the short end of the stick here. He claims it's to protect the US from, get this, China's unfair business practices. It's no secret that the president, this entire administration, has been concerned about unfair practices by the Chinese that harm American workers and businesses. The issue of overcapacity, the ways in which China has put in place a series of non-market, distorting practices in strategic sectors, he told reporters at the White House last week. So what are those supposedly unfair practices? Well, one of the claims is that China's government is unfairly subsidizing the EV industry in China, giving them an unfair advantage. But wait, what's this? The Financial Times reported the Biden administration has poured billions of dollars into subsidies for EV and battery production in the US, an effort to spur investment in a domestic clean tech sector as part of a strategy to re-industrialize the Rust Belt, slash carbon emissions, and break dependence on Chinese supply chains. As usual, the US is accusing others of doing the very thing it is doing itself. Now let's bring in Warwick Powell from the Queensland University of Technology. Warwick, it's good to see you again. First up, I think it's important to let the viewers know just how many Chinese-made electric vehicles are on the roads in the US. Now, it's my understanding that the number is so low that it almost doesn't even register. So what is the number and why is it so low? Also, why are Chinese EVs really not being sold in the US today?
Look, Chinese EVs market share in the United States is actually less than 1%. And just to give you a sense of where we're at. Last year, 2023, there was about a little bit over 1 million EVs sold in the United States, which suggests that in 2023, about 10,000 or thereabouts were EVs made in China. So most of the EVs sold in the US are not Chinese EVs at all.
And why is that?
There's a few reasons. The first reason is that the United States has already imposed a tariff on Chinese manufactured EVs into China of 27.5%, which of course pushes the price up for consumers, number one. Number two, the EV market in the US in many ways reflects the kinds of motor vehicles that Americans have traditionally bought, which is the SUVs and pickup trucks. So the EVs that have been doing well in the United States have been SUVs and pickups rather than some of the more urban street vehicles that have come out of China.
Okay, the Biden administration is trying to present the Chinese EV market as a threat to US jobs, a threat to America's ability to compete in clean energy vehicles. And they've cast China as the bad guy. But the fact of the matter is that China sells high quality, clean vehicles at a much lower price than the US could probably ever achieve in the short term anyway. China's built up massive infrastructure and supply chains that are getting vehicles out and helping cut carbon emissions sooner. So wouldn't it be smarter to work with China and allow more of a win-win situation where, US and Chinese companies could perhaps work together?
Look, there's a lot of good logic in working closely with those with the technology and the know-how to improve the economic performance of your own economy, to deliver your own citizens with better choices, and ultimately to speed up at a lower cost the ambitions towards a lower carbon economy. Now, in the motor vehicle space, I think the United States is in many respects confronted with four broad policy options. The first one is just to ban Chinese EVs full stop. The second one is to work with Chinese EV manufacturers by way of joint ventures and those sorts of things to encourage the establishment of factories in the United States. The third one is for the United States government to invest significantly itself into the industry to try to boost the transformation of manufacturing capabilities within the US itself so that it can become competitive with the alternatives from places like China. And the fourth option really is to hope that American industry will make the transitions itself. Now, which one of those four choices ultimately the United States government rests on is in some ways a little bit hard to predict, other than to say that it's highly unlikely to leave the market fully open and hope that American industry will respond appropriately. So it'll be something of the other three options.
Be interesting to see. Now, there was an interesting article in Bloomberg recently that likened Washington's tariffs to a kind of protectionism akin to imperial preference. That article said, Washington's accustomed hegemony may be harder to maintain in a future where multiple continent-sized industrial economies are jostling for primacy. Still, it will be all but impossible if America retreats into an isolationist shell. Now, what are your thoughts on that? Is the US failing to learn lessons from history here?
Look, when you're feeling under pressure, a move to a defensive posture, I think, is in many regards an understandable knee-jerk reaction, especially in the context where China has been positioned as the great existential threat to the United States. Unfortunately, that framing, I think, leads to irrational policymaking, which ultimately harms North America and harms North American communities when alternative possibilities are actually there. The challenge with the alternative possibilities is that they do involve coming down the ladder a little bit and realizing that you have to work with others as opposed to simply viewing yourself as the top dog, being able to tell others what will and won't happen.
Now, finally, and I ask you a different version of this question every time, but I think it's quite helpful. What advice would you give to Biden in regards to the EV industry specifically?
Well, like I have previously, I think that the raw materials in the United States are there for significant revitalization of manufacturing and high technology manufacturing, but it does require work. These ecosystems that are necessary for competitive, modern, high-tech manufacturing don't just appear overnight. They certainly don't appear simply because you've boosted the price of competitors coming in from overseas. They require substantial investments in human capital, in fixed capital, and in know-how. Now, the quickest and best way and the least cost way of doing that is to work with those who've actually committed historically to developing those ecosystem capabilities and bringing those capabilities into North America. And that means my advice would be find ways to collaborate with Chinese firms so that you can create win-win outcomes.
Warwick Powell, always a pleasure to have you on. So what do you guys think? Is Washington's new China EV tax just going to punish the average American? Does the US really care about protecting the environment? And most importantly, would you buy a Chinese EV? Do let me know down below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.